My daughter was 47 pounds and 9 years old when she was found alone in a locked bathroom by a woman she had never met. The neighbor, a retired school librarian named Mrs. Adiola Fasasenya, age 68, had heard the sound through the shared wall of a semi-detached house on a Tuesday afternoon in November, not screaming, not crying. Wheezing, she knocked. Then she called 999. Then she went around to the back garden and broke a window with a terracotta pot that had a dead geranium in it. My daughter's inhaler was in her school bag, which was in the front hallway, 2 meters from the bathroom door. No one else was in the house. The people who were supposed to be watching her were 22 at a birthday lunch for my mother-in-law's sister at a restaurant called the Orchard Table on Warwick Road. They had left 47 p.m. Zara's breathing had become labored at approximately 2:15 p.m. Mrs. Fasanya broke the window at 2:31 p.m. I was 4,000 miles away, finishing a night shift in a pediatric ICU in Riyadh, when phone rang. Well, back to steady ground. This is where we share real stories about holding on when the people closest to you let go. If this story speaks to you, drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My name is Nadine. I am 34 years old, and for the past 11 years I have been a registered nurse. For the last 6 of those years I have worked in pediatric intensive care. I have held children through ventilator alarms. I have sat with parents at 3 a.m. when the numbers stopped moving in the right direction. I know what a body in distress looks like before most people in the room realize anything is wrong. I am telling you this not to impress you. I am telling you this because the cruelest irony of this story is that I spent my days keeping other people's children breathing, while my own child sat in a bathroom alone, unable to. Zara, in March 2015, in Birmingham, 3 weeks early and furious about it. She came out with her fists clenched, and in 9 years she had not entirely unclenched them. She was small, always in the lower percentile, always the shortest in her class. But she carried herself like someone who had measured the room and decided she was fine with it. She had asthma from age 4, mild, managed inhaler in the morning, inhaler available at all times. We had a protocol. We had always had a protocol. She communicated through drawings. Not because she couldn't speak. She was extraordinarily articulate for her age, but because she processed the world visually before she processed it. Her school reports all said some version of the same thing. Zara, thoughtful and observant, she prefers to show rather than tell. She filled notebooks. Small ones, A6 size, yellow cover. I bought them in bulk from a stationery shop on Corporation Street. She went through roughly one every 6 weeks. Her father, Marcus, and I had separated when she was 4. It was not acrimonious, as these things go. We were 2 people who had been too young and too optimistic, and we parted without hatred, which I have always been grateful for. Marcus remarried in 2021. His wife, Danielle, is pleasant enough, a secondary school PE teacher with a loud laugh and a talent for ignoring things she doesn't want to see. They have a son together, Marcus's second child and Danielle's first. His name is Callum. He is 6 years old, and from the moment he was born, he became the organizing principal of the Whitfield family in a way that Zara never had been. Marcus's parents, his father, Derek Whitfield, 61, a retired logistics manager, and his mother, Patricia Whitfield, 58, described herself as a homemaker with a career in community volunteering, lived in Coventry, 40 minutes from Birmingham. I had always been civil with them. Not warm, but civil. They loved Zara in the way that people love things they don't entirely understand. They bought her appropriate gifts and used the right words at the right times. and I had always taken this to be sufficient. I made one error of judgment in this story, and only one. I trusted them. I trusted them because they were family, because they had never done anything overtly wrong, and because I was desperate and running out of options. And desperation, as I have since learned, has a way of making reasonable people miss the warnings that were always there. When Zara was 6, at a Christmas dinner at the Whitfield house, Priscia had said something that I had filed away and then deliberately unfiled. The way you do when you don't want to know what a piece of information means. She had been watching Zara color at the kitchen table while Callum played on the floor nearby. She'd said to Derek, not quietly enough, "She's so serious." Callum would have been chattering away. "She's just different." Not unkind exactly, just the beginning of something. In January 2024, I was offered a secondment, a 12-month contract with a private pediatric hospital in Riyadh through a recruitment company called MedBridge Staffing Solutions. The salary was 3 times what I was earning in Birmingham. The accommodation package included a 2-bedroom flat and a transport allowance. The professional development component alone, access to surgical cases I would never see in the NHS, was the kind of thing you don't turn down when you have been working toward a senior charge nurse position for 4 years. I want to be precise about the financial situation, because it matters to what I decided. At the time of the offer, I had £400 in savings. I was paying £140 per month in rent for a 2-bedroom flat in Erdington. I had a student loan balance of £28,000. Zara's school was fine, a state primary with a good Ofsted rating. But I had been watching the funding cuts slowly remove the art program that she loved, and had begun to think about what secondary school might look like for her and whether I could give her more options. The Riyadh contract would change all of that. In 1 year. The problem, of course, Marcus was her father. He had standard custody every other weekend, a week in summer. But he and Danielle both worked full-time, and Danielle had made it quietly known through Marcus that taking on a full school week, a lot with Callum still so little. I understood. I did not like it, but I understood. The other option was my own mother, who lives in Wolverhampton and who is loving and capable, but who had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and a hip problem in 2023, and who had said, gently but directly, that a full-time 9-year-old was more than she could manage reliably for a year. Which left the Whitfields. They offered. I want to be clear about that. I did not go to them with my hat in my hand. Patricia called me on a Sunday evening in February 24, after I had told Marcus about the secondment, and she said, "Nadine, to help, is our granddaughter. This is what family does." It sounded true. We drew up a formal arrangement. Marcus and I engaged a family law solicitor, a woman named Janet Oze at a firm in Digbeth, and the agreement specified that Zara would reside with Derek Whitfield income from September 2024, August 2025. Marcus would take her every other weekend, as per the existing order. I would call every day. I would visit during my approved leave blocks, December, March, and July. The Whitfields would receive a monthly contribution of £650 towards Zara's expenses, transferred on the 1st of each month, automatic from my UK account. I paid for Zara's school enrollment transfer to St. Bridget's Church of England Primary in Coventry. I packed her belongings into 4 labeled boxes and 12 color-coded bags. I wrote a 14-page document called Zara's Essentials, her asthma plan, her inhaler schedule, her food preferences and intolerances, her bedtime routine, the name and number of her GP, her school counselor's name, what to do if she woke from a nightmare, what songs she liked, what films she found too frightening, what phrases she used when she was trying not to cry. 14 pages. Patricia received it with a warm smile and set it on the kitchen counter. I flew out of the 3rd, 2024, at 6:40 a.m. Zara held my hand in the car to the airport until the last possible moment. She didn't cry. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm before I went through security. I opened it in the departures lounge. It was a drawing, the two of us, her in yellow, me in blue, standing in front of a house with a very large sun above it. She had written at the bottom, in her careful, deliberate handwriting, "I will draw everything so you don't miss it." I carried it in my ID badge holder for the rest of the year. The first warning sign came 3 weeks in. I called on a Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Riyadh time, 4 p.m. Coventry. Patricia answered and I could hear noise in the background, Callum's voice, the television. She said Zara was just finishing sing and put me on hold for 11 minutes before Zara came to the phone. Zara sounded flat, not unhappy, just flat. I asked what she'd had for dinner. She said she couldn't remember. She always remembered what she'd had for dinner. I told myself she was tired. Justing. It was only 3 weeks. The second warning came at the end of September, when I called Marcus to check in. He said the Whitfields had mentioned that Zara had been a bit difficult. I asked what that meant. He said Callum had started staying over on weekends, Danielle's idea, to give Derek and Patricia a fuller family feeling. And Zara had not been adapting well. I asked what adapting well meant. He said she'd had a few tantrums. Zara did not have tantrums. She never had. She went quiet when she was at. She drew. I filed this away. I told myself it was an adjustment period. I was 4,100 miles away and had no other options, and so I did what people in that position do. I chose to believe what I was told. October arrived, and the calls changed. They had been daily. They became every other day, because Patricia said Zara was often busy with homework or with Callum, and interruptions weren't helpful for either of them. I accepted this, with conditions. I said I needed a minimum of 4 calls per week. Patricia agreed. The calls became shorter. Zara would speak in single sentences. Yes. It was okay. I started a notebook of my own. Not yellow. I had a dark green hardback A-Psych journal from a gift shop in the airport. I began writing down dates and times, and what Zara had said on each call, and what she hadn't said, and what I could hear in the background. It was October 7th, 24, when I started doing this. I did it because a small alarm in my clinical brain had started to sound, and I knew from years of practice that when that alarm sounds quietly, you document, you don't panic. You document. October 11th, Zara said she had done a drawing but that it had got lost. She didn't say how. She moved on too quickly. October 19th. I asked Zara if she was sleeping well. She said yes. I asked if she had used her inhaler that morning. There was a pause. She said she thought so. I noted this. October 22nd, I called the school, St. Bridget's Primary, and spoke to the school secretary, a woman named Mrs. Thornton. I introduced myself as Zara's mother, gave my contact information, and asked that I be added to the emergency contact list alongside the Whitfields. Mrs. Thornton was pleasant and confirmed she would pass the request to the class teacher, a Miss Halloran. That same week, Miss Halloran sent me a brief email. She said Zara had settled into the class reasonably well, but been quieter than expected for a child her age in group activities, and that she had stopped bringing her notebook to free reading time. I noted this. Zara had carried a yellow notebook to school every day since she was 6. It was as constant as her shoes. If you have ever felt that gut feeling that something was wrong but could not prove it, stay with me. drop it and let us keep going. November came. I received a school report from the half-term assessment. Zara's grades were stable. She was strong in English and art, adequate in maths, which had always been the case. But the comments section from Miss Halloran said something that I read 3 times. Zara sometimes seems preoccupied during lessons. On one occasion I observed her staring at the classroom door for several minutes. When I checked in with her, she said she was fine, but I have flagged her for a check-in with the school counselor, Mrs. Patel, as a precaution. I called Mrs. Patel the following morning. She was warm and careful with her words. She said Zara had come to see her twice. She said Zara was not in distress in any way she could formally report, but that she had noticed things she called watchfulness, an alertness that seemed less about curiosity and more about vigilance. She said Zara had told her, in the second session, that she didn't like it when Callum was at the house because Nana is different then. I wrote that down verbatim. Nana is different then. I did not yet know what it meant. I was beginning to learn. In mid-November, Marcus's sister, a woman named Cheryl, who I had always found tolerable, but had never been close to, sent me a photograph on WhatsApp. She said she thought I should see it. It was a screenshot of Patricia's Facebook page. The photograph showed a birthday lunch, Callum's 6th birthday, which had fallen on a Saturday in November. There was a wake with racing cars on it. There were balloons. Callum was beaming in the center, wearing a paper crown. Derek was laughing. Patricia was laughing. Danielle was there and Marcus. Zara was at the edge of the frame. She was the only one not looking at the camera. She was looking at something off to the left. She had no party hat. She was holding a piece of cake on a paper plate, and the expression on her face was the expression I recognized when she was overtired and trying not to show it. I looked the photo for a long time. I saved it. I forwarded it to Janet Oze, my solicitor, with a note. 3 days later, I had a video call with Zara that Patricia arranged, a long one, 45 minutes, which was more than usual. Hovered nearby. The call was warm and almost normal, and Zara showed me a drawing she'd done at school of a whale. But at the very end, as Patricia called from another room, Zara leaned close to the screen and said, very quietly, "Mummy, I asked Nana where my yellow notebook is, and she said it was important." I kept my face completely still. I said, "I'll sort it out, love. I promise." I wrote the time and date in my green notebook. 6:47 p.m., November 24. The yellow notebook had appeared for the first time in September. Zara's backup, her second one of the year, the one she'd packed herself. It was now missing. I called Patricia the next morning and asked about it. Patricia said she didn't know anything about a notebook, that Zara was always leaving things around, that she couldn't be expected to keep track of every little thing. That was the phrase, every little thing. A child's method of communicating with her mother. Her only method, her chosen language, dismissed as every little thing. I ordered 4 new yellow notebooks from Amazon. I had them delivered to the Whitfield house. 2 weeks later, when I asked Zara if she'd received them, she said yes, but that they were in the drawer in the spare room, and she wasn't to take them out until she'd finished her homework. Every day. She said sometimes there was a lot of homework. Zara was 9. There is not that much homework when you are 9. I do not think Patricia Whitfield is a monster. I want to be honest about that. Because this story is not a story about monsters. It is a story about a woman who had decided, long before September 2024, which children in her family mattered more, and who had never been asked to examine that decision until it became undeniable. The evidence mounted in small, deniable pieces. In December, when I was due to visit, My flight was delayed by 22 hours due to a mechanical fault, and I arrived on the 23rd instead of the 22nd. I had called ahead. When I arrived at the Whitfield house at 11:30 a.m., Callum was in the living room, in what was clearly a permanent setup. His toys in a box in the corner, his name on a paper Christmas stocking on the mantelpiece. There was no stocking with Zara's name. When I looked for it, Patricia said it was in the kitchen and produced one from a drawer after a pause. It was store-bought, plain red. Callum's was hand-sewn, embroidered with a reindeer. I said nothing in the moment. I photographed both stockings when no one was looking. During that December visit, I witnessed the following, and I wrote Eastman green notebook with time stamps. On December 3rd at 1:50 p.m., Zara spilled a glass of water at the lunch table. Patricia spoke to her in a clipped, taut voice and said, "Zara, you must be more careful. This is not your house." Callum knocked his off his plate 12 minutes later, and Patricia said, brightly, "Oh, Butterfingers," and picked it up. On December 24th at 7:30 p.m., I watched Zara approach Derek to show him a drawing. He looked at it for approximately 3 seconds, nodded, and went back to the television. When Callum came in 10 minutes later to show the same man a toy car, Derek set his glass down, picked Callum up, and spent 7 minutes examining the car and making engine noises. Zara watched this from the doorway. She did not say anything. She went back upstairs. On December 26th, in the kitchen, Patricia was on the phone with her sister. I was in the hallway. I heard Patricia say the following, and I remember it precisely because as I stood very still and said the words to myself times, so I would not forget them. "She's fine, she's just not a very easy child." Marcus's first was always going to be a different situation. Callum's completely different. Night and day. I went upstairs and wrote it down. I confronted Marcus quietly that evening in the car. I said, "Your daughter is being treated differently in that house. I need you to see it." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My mum loves Zara." And then, and this is the line I cannot forget, the line that told me exactly what I was dealing with. "Callum's just easier. Some kids are easier. That's not discrimination, Nadine. That's just how it is." I was on a plane back to Riyadh 36 hours later. I had not resolved anything. I had only documented it. It was the first week of 2025 when everything changed. Patricia owned a brooch. It had been her mother's. A small oval thing with seed pearls around the edge and a cameo in the center, ivory-colored, profile. Patricia wore it occasionally and kept it in a glass dish on her dressing table. I had seen it 3 or 4 times. It was beautiful in the way that old things are beautiful. I do not believe it was worth very much money. It was worth a great deal of sentiment. On February 6th, a Thursday, Callum came to stay for the weekend. He had been to the Whitfield house perhaps a dozen times since September, each visit slightly longer than the last. He was, by every account, an energetic and often difficult 6-year-old, which is entirely appropriate for a 6-year-old who had the habit of getting into things that were not his. On Friday, February 7th, the brooch went missing from the glass dish. Patricia found it missing on Saturday morning. According to Marcus, who relayed the story to me on Sunday evening when I called, Patricia had asked both children about it. Callum had said immediately that he hadn't touched it. He had also said, with the confident specificity of a 6-year-old who has just improvised a story, that he had seen Zara go into the bedroom the day before. This was accepted as fact. No one asked Callum how long he had seen her there. No one asked whether he had been in the bedroom himself. No one searched either child's belongings with any consistency. No one considered that a 6-year-old playing alone in a house full of small interesting objects might have touched a small interesting object and not remembered, or not said so, because no one had asked him directly. Patricia went to Zara's room. She asked Zara if she had taken the brooch. Zara said no. Patricia said, "Callum saw you go in my room." Zara said, "I went to get the hand cream from the bathroom. The door was open. I didn't touch anything." Patricia said, "Callum doesn't lie. I cannot tell you how long I sat with those 3 words after Marcus told them to me. They are the words that reveal everything, not a single event, but a whole architecture of belief. Callum doesn't lie. Not let's look more carefully. Not I need to understand what happened. Just a closed door, nailed shut, with my daughter on the outside of it." Zara went to her room. She was not allowed to watch the film they watched that evening. She was told she would need to think about whether she was ready to tell the truth. I did not find out any of this until Sunday evening, because Marcus had been at the house for the weekend and had not thought to call me. He seemed, when he told me, slightly uncomfortable but not alarmed. He said, "Mum's just upset about the brooch. You know how she is about her mum's." I asked him, "Do you believe took it?" Pause. He said, "Callum wouldn't make something like that up." I put the phone down. I called Zara immediately. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting. Her voice was very quiet and very controlled, which was the voice she used when she was working extremely hard not to cry. She said, "Mum, I didn't take it." I said, "I know you didn't." She said, "Nobody believes me." "I believe you. And I am sorting this out." She was silent. She was for a moment. Then she said, "A picture of what happened." I put in my yellow notebook. I said, "Keep it safe. Don't let anyone take it." She said, "Okay." The brooch, I would later learn, was found 4 days later. It was in the gap between the baseboard and the floor on Callum's side of the shared guest room, exactly where a 6-year-old who had been playing with and then heard someone might hide it quickly. Patricia. Marcus told me there was no apology to Zara. Not a word. Patricia said she was glad it had turned up and that it had all been a misunderstanding. Was not told she had been believed. She was not told anything. She was simply expected to continue as before. November in Coventry does not ease in gradually. It arrives in a single gray week and stays. By the second week of November 2024, the city had already had 2 frosts, and the cold settled into the semi-detached houses on Chadwick Road, with the particular persistence of drafts that old double glazing cannot stop. February continued in the same spirit. On Tuesday, February 18, 2025, a Tuesday, came home from school. She had been coughing mildly for 2 days, which is not unusual for a child with asthma in cold weather. The school had noted it. Miss Halloran had sent a brief text to Patricia's mobile, saying that Zara had seemed a little breathless at afternoon break, and suggesting her inhaler use be checked. This received at 3:47 p.m. The Whitfields had been planning for 3 weeks to attend the birthday lunch of Patricia's sister, Beverly, at the Orc Table on Warwick Road. The booking was 12:30. Beverly was turning 60. There would be family there. Had a new dress. Derek had booked the car. Zara asked that morning if she could come. Patricia said it was an adult lunch and that Zara would be fine at home for a few hours. Zara was 9. The house was warm. There was food in the fridge. She would be 2 hours, 3 at the most. The inhaler was in Zara's school bag in the front hallway. Zara would later tell me, very carefully, what happened after they left. She said she had been in the living room watching television when the cough got worse. She described it as her chest feeling like a sock being pulled tight. She knew the feeling. She had felt it before. She went to the front hallway to get her inhaler from her school bag, but the bag wasn't on the hook. Patricia had moved it. Zara thought to the understairs cupboard, because Patricia said bags in the hallway looked untidy. Zara couldn't open the understairs cupboard. It had a stiff handle. She had never been strong enough to work alone. She had asked to fix this in October, and he had not. She tried to call Patricia's mobile. It rang out. She left a voicemail. She tried Marcus. He was at the restaurant too. It rang out. She went to the downstairs bathroom because it was warm and she could sit on the floor and lean against the wall, which she had learned from me reduced the panic component of an asthma episode and helped her breathe. She had left the door unlocked, she told me. She did not lock it. She just needed somewhere to sit. At approximately 2:15 p.m., her breathing became labored enough that she could no longer speak clearly. She did not have a phone she could make calls from. She had a children's tablet with Wi-Fi that she used for video calls. It was upstairs. She could not get to it. She sat on the bathroom floor and breathed. 2 houses away, Mrs. Adiola Fasenya, retired librarian, 68 years old, a woman who had fostered 14 children over a 30-year period and recognized the sound of a child in medical distress through a wall, heard a noise she did not like. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She walked around to the back garden. The bathroom window, a small frosted pane on the side return, was the one through which she could hear most clearly. She called through it. "Is someone there?" "Are you all right?" She heard a sound. She later told the police that she had been a foster carer long enough to know that you do not wait for certainty. Act on the sound. She called 9999 at 2:28 p.m. She told them, "There's a child in this house, and she can't breathe, and there is no adult here." Then she picked up the terracotta pot with the dead geranium in it and put it through the back kitchen window. The ambulance arrived at 2:41 p.m. Paramedics found Zara on the bathroom floor, alert but unable to speak in full sentences, oxygen saturation at 91%. They administered salbutamol via nebulizer. By the time they reached University Hospital Coventry, she was stable. She was frightened. She was alone. Mrs. Fasanya rode in the ambulance with her and held her hand. My phone rang at 3:22 p.m. Riyadh time. It was a number I didn't recognize, a Coventry area code. I answered it in a supply corridor outside the ICU, still in my scrubs. A woman said, "Is this Zara's mom? My name is Adiola Fasanya. Your daughter is going to be all right. But you need to know what happened." I was on a plane within 19 hours. I had called the ward sister, filed emergency personal leave under my hospital's critical family illness policy, and booked the 10:15 a.m. Emirates flight from Riyadh to Birmingham via Dubai, which landed at 7:44 p.m. local time on February 19th. I went directly to University Hospital Coventry. Zara was in a pediatric assessment bay on the 3rd floor. They had kept her overnight for observation. She was propped against 2 pillows with a pulse oximeter clipped to her finger, the wire neatly across the blanket, and she was drawing. A yellow notebook, one of the ones I had sent in December, open on her knee, a pencil moving in slow, deliberate strokes. She was wearing the blue hospital gown with the small white dots, and over it, inexplicably, a paper crown, the kind from a Christmas cracker, gold-colored. The nurse told me later that she had found it in her coat pocket and put it on at some point during the evening and simply kept it there. She looked up when I came through the curtain. "I knew you'd come tonight." I sat on the edge of the bed and I did not say anything for a moment. I looked at her. I checked her color, her respiratory rate, the reading on the monitor, occupational habit, a nurse's eye before a mother's arms. She was fine. She was genuinely, measurably, documentably fine. I held her. She said into my shoulder, "Mrs. Fasanya said I was very brave." I said, "Mrs. Fasanya?" 30 minutes later, Darren and Patricia arrived. They had been at the hospital earlier, I was told, and had gone home to eat, planning to return. They came through the curtain together, Patricia in her birthday lunch dress, a mauve wrap thing, slightly damp at the hem from the car park. Derek with his hands in his pockets. Patricia said, "We didn't think she was that unwell. Seemed fine this morning." I looked at her. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I had cried on the plane in the last 20 minutes before landing, with my forehead against the cold oval window and a complimentary blanket pulled up to my chin. I had used that time for crying. I did not have more to spend on it. I said, "We will speak. Not now, not here. But we will speak." Patricia opened her mouth. I turned back to Zara. Derek put his hand on Patricia's arm and steered her out of the bay. She went without another word, one sentence. That was all I needed. I stayed in Coventry. I called Medbridge Staffing Solutions on the morning of February 20th and invoked the compassionate leave clause in my contract. Clause subsection B, critical child welfare event, and was granted 4 weeks of paid leave effective immediately. I arranged an extension in the 3rd week, under the hardship reassignment provision, and transferred back to the NHS bank for the remainder of the contract period. I was not going back to Riyadh. Not until this was settled. I did not scream. I did not threaten. I let the system do what it was built to do. The first aid, after the staffing company was to Janet Oze, was 30 a.m. on February 20th. I had my green notebook in front of me. I read her 4 months of entries. She was quiet throughout. When I finished, she said, "Right. I want you to do 5 things today." I did them. I filed a report with the Coventry Services Department. The duty social worker's name was Mr. Obi Mensah. I spoke to him for 40 minutes. I read him the school emails, the counselor's notes, the dates of missed calls, the photograph of the birthday party, the detail of the brochure and the events February 18th. He opened a formal file, Welfare Concern file under reference number CVB 2025-0342. He said a home assessment would be scheduled within 5 working days. I went to St. Bridget's Primary and met with Mrs. Patel, the school counselor, in person for the first time. She had printed the notes from both of her sessions with Zara. She gave me copies, with the school's written consent, and signed a statement confirming the content of what Zara had told her, including in the phrase "Nana is different when Callum is here." This statement was dated and witnessed by the deputy head teacher. 3rd, I called Miss Halloran and formally requested the full attendance record for Zara's time at St. Bridget's. There were 4 late arrivals on record, all on Monday mornings following weekends when Callum had stayed at the house. Zara had told me she was often made to wait for Derek to finish breakfast. I had the records printed and logged. 4th, I spoke to Mrs. Adiola Fasanya at her home on Chadwick Road. I brought her a bunch of white tulips from the corner shop, which she accepted without ceremony and put immediately in a vase. She made tea. She told me what she had heard, what she had done, and what she had seen when the paramedics arrived. She agreed to provide a written statement, which she produced 2 days later on 2 sides of cream writing paper in a clear, deliberate hand. She signed it with her full name. She noted her 30 years of foster care experience and her professional familiarity with childhood distress. It was, in its quiet precision, one of the most powerful documents I have ever read. 5th, I retrieved the voicemail. Zara had called Patricia's mobile at 2:09 p.m. on February 18th. The voicemail recording, 4 seconds long, contained only the sound of breathing and then silence. Patricia had not called back for 47 minutes, by which time the ambulance had already arrived. The phone company confirmed the timestamps. Janet Ozay instructed me to save the recording, which I did, forwarded to my own email and to hers, and backed up to a cloud folder I labeled the evidence file. On February 24th, Mr. Mensah completed his home assessment of the Whitfield property. He cited the inaccessible understairs cupboard, the stiff handle, confirmed by measurement, as a structural access failure under the welfare arrangement. He noted the absence of a clearly visible emergency medication protocol posted in the home, which had been specified as a requirement in Zara's medical care plan. He noted that Callum's weekend visits, which had been approved by Marcus but never formally disclosed to me or to Children's Services as a change in the household arrangement, constituted an unregistered variation in the care agreement. He filed his formal findings on February 28th. The findings stated, in summary, that Zara had been placed in a household environment where her welfare needs were inconsistently prioritized, where her medical care plan had not been adequately maintained, and where she had been left without appropriate adult supervision during a documented medical episode. He recommended suspension of the primary care arrangement with the Whitfields pending a formal review. Zara came to stay with me at a rented room in a Coventry guest house that night, and she did not return to the Whitfield house. The family court review was scheduled for March 12, 2025, at the Coventry Family Court on Much Park Street. It was not a trial. It was a formal welfaring convened under the Children Act. The district judge named His Honor Judge Asante presiding. Janet Ozay represented me. Marcus had a solicitor as well, a man named Gerald Heath, who was quiet throughout and said very little that was useful. Derek and Patricia Whitfield attended. Patricia wore a gray blazer and carried a beige handbag and looked, at first glance, like someone who had come to sort out a small administrative misunderstanding. The evidence file was submitted the preceding week. It contained 47 pages. I had organized it into 7 sections: medical records, school documentation, correspondence log, photographic evidence, witness statements, financial records showing the monthly £650 transfers with no accompanying acknowledgement or update communication from the Whitfields and the Children's Services Formal Findings CV 2025-0342. Mrs. Patel's statement was in Section 2. Mrs. Fasania's 2-page letter was in Section. The voicemail timestamp confirmation was in Section 6. Patricia's. She had brought her own. A woman named Miss Carver had submitted a counterstatement. It described Zara as a challenging child, noted that the February 18th incident had been an unfortunate oversight rather than negligence, and suggested that my absence for the year had created attachment difficulties that the Whitfields had been doing their best to manage. I read this counterstatement twice on the evening of March 11th. I wrote one sentence in my green notebook, and I did not write anything else. In the hearing, after both solicitors had presented, Asante asked Patricia Whitfield directly, "Mrs. Whitfield, on the afternoon of February 18th, were you aware that Zara had a documented respiratory condition that required daily management?" Patricia said yes. He said, "Were you aware that the child's medical care plan, signed by you in September 2024 and entered into evidence, specified that emergency medication must be accessible to the child at all times, including when adults were not present?" There was a pause. Patricia said, "We didn't think she'd be in difficulty. She seemed fine." Judge Asante looked at her over his reading glasses. He said nothing for a moment. Then he made a note. I spoke once in that hearing directly. I was given the opportunity to address the welfare assessment findings. I said the following: my daughter spent 47 months of her 9 years in the ICU where I work, waiting for other children's breathing to stabilize. She knew the protocol. She followed it. She sat on a bathroom floor alone and waited for someone to hear her. Because the cupboard with her inhaler, one that no one had bothered to fix, the only adult who came was a stranger. I am asking this court to ensure that going forward, the adults responsible for my daughter are held to a standard that a 9-year-old should not have to be. Gerald Heath did not say anything. Miss Carver attempted a response about context and extenuating circumstances. Judge Asante let her finish and then set down his pen. The formal order, issued on March 12, 2025, stated, prayer responsibility is to be returned to the child's mother forthwith. No unsupervised contact between the child and the paternal grandparents is to take place pending a 6-month welfare review. All future care arrangements involving third parties must be approved by both parents and filed with Children's Services. The paternal grandparents are to undertake a mandatory safeguarding awareness course as a condition of any future supervised contact. Patricia left the courtroom without looking at Zara. Derek paused at the door. He looked at Zara, then at me. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He left. On March 12, 2025, at 2:23 p.m., Zochteld walked out of the Coventry Family Court on Much Park Street in a yellow raincoat, size A9, with a hood that was slightly too big, and fell over her forehead when she tilted head down. She was holding the yellow notebook, the one she had hidden, the one with the drawing of what had happened during the brooch incident. In the corner of the room, holding something small, Zara in the doorway, 2 figures and 1 object, and the exact spatial logic that a 9-year-old with a visual memory had recorded without being asked. She had kept it safe for 6 weeks. She was carrying it under her arm when she came down the court steps. Absent, yellow coat button to the top. She took my hand at the bottom of the steps without looking at me, which was the way she always took my hand, not seeking reassurance, just registering contact. Just knowing I was there. She said, "Can we chips?" I said yes. We got chips from a van outside the Coventry Ring Road, standing in the cold in our coats, and she ate them with deliberate satisfaction, and she did not say anything else about the court or the Whitfields or the bathroom on Chadwick Road. Then she said, "I drew a picture of Mrs. Fasanya. She looks like someone from a book." I said, "She does. I'm going to give it to her." We went back to the guest house and she finished the drawing that evening. She gave it to Mrs. Fasanya the next morning, rolled up and tied with a piece of yellow ribbon she had found in the pocket of her coat. Mrs. Fasanya put it on her mantelpiece. By June 2025, 3 months after the hearing, we were living in a 2-bedroom flat in Leamington Spa, 20 minutes from Coventry, from Birmingham. It had a garden, small, south-facing, loud with pigeons in the morning. Zara designated one corner at her outdoor studio and sat there on dry evenings with her notebook. She had started at a new school, New Bold C of E Primary, in April. The school counselor there, a man named Mr. Oduya, had been briefed by Mrs. Patel with Zara's consent. He was patient and observational and did not push. By May, Zara had begun to talk in class again. Not effusively. She was still watching. But the watchfulness that Mrs. Patel had named had softened into something closer to ordinary attention. She still had asthma. She would always have asthma. Her inhaler lived in a small yellow pouch on a hook by the front door at eye level, beside a laminated copy of her care plan. She knew where it was. She could open the door herself. Came every other Sunday, as the court order specified. The visits were brief and sometimes awkward and gradually became less so. He had said, in a conversation in April that I will summarize rather than fully recount, that he had not understood what was happening in his parents' house until he was forced to read the evidence file. He was not, in that conversation, a villain. He was a man who had chosen not to look and who was now, slowly, beginning to look. I did not forgive him. I did not condemn him. I drew a line and held it. Patricia and Derek attended the mandatory safeguarding awareness course in May. I learned this from Marcus. I did not comment on it. The 6-month welfare review was scheduled for September. I had my paperwork ready. Derek wrote a letter. It arrived post in late May. Actual post, a white envelope, his handwriting on the front, a Coventry postmark. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph said he was sorry. The second paragraph explained, in measured terms, that he had allowed things in his household to happen that he should have addressed, and that he knew he could not repair this quickly or easily. The third paragraph asked if, in time, Zara might be willing to send him a drawing. Any drawing. I gave the letter to Zara without comment. She read it twice. She put it in her yellow notebook. She did not say anything about it that day. 3 weeks later, without being asked, she sent him a drawing of a garden with pigeons in it. She did not put her name on it. She sent it. I did not write the green notebook to build a case. I wrote it because I had been trained to document and because some part of me knew. Even in October, even in November, even when I could not prove anything, that quiet harm is still harm. The hardest part of being away was not the distance. It was the smallness of what was happening. There was no single terrible event to point to. There was a birthday party photograph, and a missing notebook, and a phrase, "Callum doesn't lie," and a stiff cupboard handle that nobody fixed, small enough that you could dismiss each one, accumulated enough to cost my daughter her breath. If you are watching this from far away, from another country, another city, another room, and something is telling you that the people you trusted with what you love most are not seeing your child, she deserves to be seen. Trust that. Document it. Find the Mrs. Fasanias in your life, the people who will break a window without waiting to be asked. And when the system is slow and the evidence is thin, and the people around you are telling you that you're reading too much into things, keep writing. Keep the dates. Keep the exact words. The truth, patient. It will wait for the right room. If this reminded you that quiet harm is still harm, and that the clearest way through is documentation, patience, and one person willing to window, share this someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next.